Sa halip ako ay pinaaresto, pinakulong, binusanan ng halos 7 taon gamit ang mga gawa-gawang ebidensya. The objective for targeting me was threefold: to silence me, to destroy my credibility, and to serve as an example to others.
Nabanggit po ni Senator Laila de Lima na ang leader mismo ng Davao Death Squad ay mismo yung dating mayor din, Mayor Rodrigo Duterte. Did I hear it right, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
At Mr. Chair, siya po yung merong alias na Superman bilang leader ng Davao Death Squad?
That is correct.
Ang intelligence funds ng PNP noong 2017 ay nasa 468 million pesos lamang, Mr. Chair. Walang kalahating bilyong piso ang intelligence funds ng PNP. So kung ganun, Mr. Chair, saan pwede talagang kumuha nung ganun kalaking pera bilang pangbayad, bilang premyo doon sa mga pulis na nakapatay?
But did they employ buy-bust operations and Nalalaman to perpetrate this so-called war on drugs?
To answer your question, Your Honor, I have to point out that the Nalalaman concept actually originated in Davao and invented by the DDS. So it's not something new. There may be fewer cases then, kasi karamihan nga is the riding in tandem, mga vigilante killings. Hindi lang po pagpay ang naging resulta ng war on drugs ni Duterte. There are also those who were unjustly imprisoned based on planted and fabricated evidence. Ako nga po yung one of the very first victims of that.
We can't escape the fact that the cases were filed against you po. May we just know what is the status of these cases right now?
There were 3 drug-related cases filed against me. And all 3 cases now have been dismissed, have been acquitted. These are definitely trumped-up charges.
So now we proceed with acknowledging former Senator Laila de Lima for your opening statement. Please proceed.
Good morning to the lead chair of the Quad Committee, Representative Barbers, to the chairs of the other committees constituting the Quadcom, the members of the Quadcom, members of Congress, and also good morning to the other resource persons invited for today's hearing. Actually po, I have both a statement and a presentation. Medyo mahaba po, and I was advised right before the hearing that I should cut it down. Although mahaba po talagang presentation ko. Best efforts, I will try to abbreviate. I attend this hearing with a deep sense of irony. I have not forgotten that in September and October of 2016, the House Committee on Justice conducted the inquiry on the Bilibid trade. However, unlike this hearing, the real subject of that hearing was not really about the trade. The real subject of that 2016 House Committee hearing was all about destroying me for conducting a Senate inquiry which in so many aspects was like this one. The only difference between this hearing and that Senate hearing is that my committee inquiry was 8 years earlier and Duterte was at the peak of power. Sa Senate hearing pong yun ay kinundin ako yung war ni Duterte. At nagmakaawa pa po ako na tigilan na ito habang ilang daan pa lang ang mga nagiging biktima at wag na sanang paabutin pa ng libo-libo. Ngunit sa kasawiang palad, wala pong nakinig sa akin, lalo na may mga mayorya po tayo ng mga senador at congressman na ayon kay Senator Bongo noong isang araw ay walang sawa sa pagpalakpak kay Pangulong Duterte sa bawat banggit niya sa pagsulong na madugong war sa kanyang mga sona. Sa halip ako ay pinaaresto, pinakulong, binusanan ng halos 7 taon gamit ang mga gawa-gawang ebidensya katulad ng testimonya ng mga ilang Bilibid drug lords at inmates. I'd like to say that the objective for targeting me was threefold: to silence me, to destroy my credibility, and to serve as an example to others. By doing all 3, my message to the people against Duterte's JKs would no longer be heard or listened to, and no one else would dare to act as a messenger after seeing what was done to me. Since all 3 were achieved, the JKs became accepted by public officials and the general population. This led to more killings because no one was arresting and prosecuting the killer cops and the vigilantes. This was impunity as never seen before in the Philippines outside of Davao. Sobrang nakakalungkot na ngayon lamang nagkaroon ng napaka-komprehensibong pagtalakay ang Kamara de Representantes sa war at mga JK. pagkatapos ng tumambak ang libo-libong bangkay na naging biktima ng war. Ayon nga po kay Professor Randy David, marahil ang pandinig na ito ng Kamara ay katumbas na rin ng aming pinapangarap na Truth Commission na hihimay sa mga tunay na pangyayari sa 6 na taon na pagpaslang ng ating sariling gobyerno at kapulisan sa libo-libo nating mga kababayan. But right now, I don't want to discuss it, but my position is that pwede pa sigurong i-consider yung creation ng Truth Commission. At tingnan din ho natin na hindi lang po pagpatay ang naging resulta ng war on drugs ni Duterte. There are also those who were unjustly imprisoned based on planted and fabricated evidence. Ako nga po yung one of the very first victims of that. Ngayon naman po, ito na rin po ang pinatutuo yung sa bagong revelasyon ni Police Colonel Royina Garma nang binulgar niya sa huling hearing ng Quadcom na siya ang inatasan mismo ni Pangulong Duterte na maghanap ng tao sa PNP na maasahan niya sa pag-iimplementa ng war alinsunod sa modelong ginawa niya sa Davao City. That's why my presentation, and I'll try to really make it brief, would cover 4 matters, 4 topics. One is the recent disclosure of Kerwin Espinosa. I'd like to comment on that. 2 is the importance of the 2009 CHR investigation of the DDS to the inquiry of this committee. 3 is the revelation of former Police Colonel Royina Garma that the war was modeled after the Davao anti-drug campaign. And I'd like also to touch the relevance of Republic Act number 9851 on crimes against humanitarian law, genocide, and other crimes against humanity in enforcing accountability. So ito na po yung aking presentation. Although meron po akong mga i-skip because actually part of my presentation are some videos, but hindi ko na po yon ipapakita because of the limited time. So nung narinig ko nga po yung testimonya ni Kerwin Espinosa last hearing, it was Senator Bato de la Rosa who ordered him to lie under oath before the Senate in November 2016. Hindi na po ako nagulat doon. Si Kerwin actually already retracted his fabricated testimony against me in April 2022, around the same time that Rafael Ragos, the former Bucor OIC and NBI Deputy Director, also recanted in accusing me of receiving money from the Libid lords. Doon po sa hearing sa Senado ay talaga namang sinabi ko doon na lahat po ng mga sinasabi nila tungkol sa akin, so yung pagiging protector ko daw nung illegal drug trade ni Mr. Kerwin Espinosa ay wala ho yung katotohanan. I vehemently, categorically, and firmly went on record in denying those accusations. Sinabi ko rin noon na yung mga sinasabi nila Kerwin Espinosa, ni Ronnie Dayan, and ni Colonel Espinido ay wala talagang katotohanan. In the first place, hindi nga sila magkakilala. Nauna na nilang sinabi yun before they were presented before the Senate na hindi sila mga magkakilala. Nandito si Colonel Espinido. If the Quad Committee would be so kind as to indulge me, gusto ko sana makiusap kay Colonel Espinido. Sabihin niya na yung katotohanan. Kasi yung all he said during that Senate hearing was just let God be the witness to my innocence or something to that effect. Sana po ngayon, Colonel Espinido, sabihin nyo na rin po ang katotohanan. Kung pwede sabihin nyo na rin o i-corroborate nyo yung sinabi ni Kerwin na si then PNP Chief De La Rosa and now Senator De La Rosa ang involved or responsible for ordering the 3 of you to fabricate accusations against me. Now, sinabi ko rin po kanina na I'd like to discuss the relevance of the CHR investigation and the Quadcom inquiry. Maybe at this point, I cannot yet do that. Sasabihin ko lang po na mahalaga yung naging CHR investigation namin in 2009 into the DDS killings. Kasi pwede itong maging reference point in terms of painting a picture of the organization, the Davao Death Squad, the operation, and the implementation of the Duterte drug war from the barangay to the national level. Kasi sinabi na nga ho ni Colonel Garma, yung kanyang mga revelasyon na the extrajudicial killings, yung mga operations under Duterte's drug war beginning in 2016 was just patterned after the Davao model. And the Davao model can only refer or can only mean the DDS model or the Davao Death Squad. Doon naman sa affidavit po ni Colonel Garma, presented and expounded upon the last hearing, I'd like to share some information we got and some findings on the Davao model of payment and rewards mentioned by Colonel Garma. This information is limited to the facts uncovered during the 2009 CHR investigation on the Davao Death Squad. Next slide, please. The history of the DDS can be divided into two: the period from 1988 to 1998 and the period from 2001 to 2016. So may break po. The break in these two periods coincides with then Mayor Rodrigo Duterte's hiatus as mayor of Davao City when he was elected congressman instead of mayor in 1998 due to the 3-term limit. So for brevity, I'll refer to the former mayor as MRRD. According to a witness in the 2009 CHR investigation, during the first period of the DDS from 1988 to 2000, the assassins were paid 15,000 for every victim. 5,000 goes to the police handler and 10,000 to the assassins, who at the time consisted of rebel returnees aside from the active duty policemen who were their handlers. Their safe house was located inside the Nobelcom compound in Barangay San Pedro, Davao. After the summary execution of targeted victims, the DDS members would regroup at their safe house and divide the reward. During that time, MRRD sometimes personally gave out the kill orders and the reward money directly to the assassins themselves. Upon the return of MRRD as mayor of Davao in 2001, the DDS was upgraded into the Heinous Crimes Investigation Section, or HCIS, located at the Almendras Gym compound. The HCIS was an official unit of the DCPO, or the Davao City Police Office. The HCIS consists of both active duty PNP and civilian abanteros, or hitmen. Most of the hitmen are rebel returnees. They are supervised by PNP handlers. Each handler supervises 3 members. The task of the PNP handler is to give orders to his members as well as be responsible for their protection. According to the CHR witness, he was given a regular monthly salary of 5,000. During this time, the reward given to a team for every victim was anywhere from 13,000 to 15,000, 3,000 to 5,000 goes to the PNP handler, 7,000 to 8,000 was shared among the rebel returnees, and 500 to 1,000 to civilian informants. The HCIS civilian personnel or rebel returnees directly received salaries as auxiliary service workers. The funds for their salaries came from the office of the mayor. Functions have also been specialized, with members being designated to do either office support or field work. A team of 1 PNP handler and 3 civilian abanteros was given an average of 3 targets every month. May I now go also to the revelation of Arturo Las Cañas. Yung mga naging findings po namin, although yung iba po doon, mga unofficial findings ng CHR investigation, were eventually confirmed by Edgar Matobato and Arturo Las Cañas when they went public at the Senate with their stories and executed affidavits in 2016 and 2017. Matobato executed an affidavit and was filed with the Ombudsman as a criminal complaint against Duterte and other DDS members. That criminal complaint is still pending sa Office of the Ombudsman. The most comprehensive account on the DDS from its founding in 1988 up to 2016 is the affidavit of Arturo Las Cañas, which was submitted to the ICC. This affidavit consists of 186 pages of gory details on the sociopathic behavior of Duterte as founder and leader of the DDS. Yung 186-page affidavit po yan, actually it was serialized in an investigative or feature story of Rappler in November 2021. Apparently, Rappler got hold of a copy of this affidavit and also the ICC's 3rd agreement on limited use of information dated November 11, 2020. This instrument gave Las Cañas limited immunity as a witness in the ICC investigation on the Philippine war on drugs. Noong 2024 naman po, Las Cañas reiterated the contents of his ICC affidavit in another serialized feature, this time published by Files, entitled Conversations with Arturo Las Cañas. Ito naman po ang sinasabi ni Las Cañas, that during the period 1988 to 1998, so I'm just talking here about the organization, kasi napakadami po ng mga sinabi niya sa kanyang comprehensive affidavit. So I'm focusing on the organization of DDS dahil nga ito yung naging model ng drug war. According to Las Cañas' ICC affidavit, during the period 1988 to 1998, when the DDS was constituted as the Anti-Crime Task Force of MRRD, DDS members were paid anywhere from 10,000 to 20,000 for every victim. This was the reward for the ordinary victims. Pag mga matataas naman po, the so-called special project killings, they were rewarded anywhere from 100,000 to 1 million pesos, depending on the status of the target. Civilian hitmen called force multipliers were given 3,000 to 5,000 per victim as their share in this reward. The DDS logistics and finances came from the Peace and Order or Intel Fund of MRRD. This includes weekly gas allowance, monthly cash allowance, and Christmas cash gifts. Next slide, please. Las Cañas also confirmed the CHR findings on the organizational structure of the DDS under the HCIS, or Heinous Crimes Investigation Section, from 2001 to 2016. And this is as follows. MRRD, alias Superman, as the highest leader and mastermind of the DDS. SPO4 Sanson Benaventura as the logistics, finance, and death clearance feature or officer. SPO3 Arturo Las Cañas as overall team leader for operations and planning. SPO4 Bienvenido Laud as team handler and in charge of the Laud Quarry mass grave. And SPO3 Jim Tan as team handler and in charge of the Mandug mass grave. Actually, mas intricate yung inattach ni Mr. Las Cañas sa kanyang ICC affidavit about the organizational structure of the DDS. What I just mentioned, I just simplified it to show who are really at the top of the DDS hierarchy. Most of the policemen handlers and their respective teams of civilian force multipliers were under the command of Arturo Las Cañas as operations and planning leader of the DDS. So sinabi ko po na that must be the Davao model na binanggit ni Colonel Garma. Finally, by way of just sharing my knowledge, last na po ito, kung pwede po sana. Tungkol na lang muna po sa RA 9851. Kasi hindi po ito masyadong alam ng karamihan. We do have a law entitled An Act Defining and Penalizing Crimes Against International Humanitarian Law, Genocide and Other Crimes Against Humanity, Organizing, Jurisdiction, Designating Special Courts, and for related purposes. This was enacted in December 11, 2009. It punishes almost the same crimes mentioned in the Rome Statute, over which the ICC has jurisdiction. RA 9851 was enacted almost 2 years before the Philippines finally joined the ICC on November 1, 2011, after the Senate ratified the Rome Statute in August 2011. The crime of EJ case, carried out by state security forces and their agents in the implementation of the war on drugs, fall under the general category of other crimes against humanity under Section 6, which consists of acts committed as part of a widespread or systematic attack directed against any civilian population with knowledge of the attack. These acts include willful killing, so murder, extermination, murder, multiple murder, torture, and enforced disappearance, among others. The penalty for the crime of systematic attack against any civilian population resulting in death is reclusion perpetua. It's a non-bailable crime. According to Section 8, a person who orders, solicits, or merely induces the systematic attack on the civilian population and which thereafter occurs or is attempted is liable as a principal. The same applies to anyone who contributes to the commission of the crime by a group of persons acting with a common purpose. Section 9 provides that official capacity as a head of state or government shall in no case exempt a person from criminal responsibility under this act, nor shall it in and of itself constitute a ground for reduction of sentence. The crimes defined and penalized under that law, their prosecution and the execution of sentences imposed on their account shall not be subject to any prescription. Pwede po silang tugusin or tugisin habang buhay. Finally, and this one is important, hindi po ito masyadong napapansin, Section 17 on jurisdiction provides that, quote, relevant Philippine authorities may dispense with the investigation or prosecution of a crime punishable under this act if another court or international tribunal is already conducting the investigation or undertaking the prosecution of such crime. Instead, the authorities may surrender or extradite suspected or accused persons in the Philippines to the appropriate international court, if any, or to another state, pursuant to the applicable extradition laws and treaties. Napakasimple po, sa aking palagay, sa aking pagkaalam, napakasimple po ang ibig sabihin ng batas na ito. Hindi pa tayo miyembro ng ICC o ng Rome Statute, kinilala na natin ang kapangyarihan ng international bodies like the ICC na imbestigahan at litisin ng mga krimeng nasasaad sa RA 9851. Hindi pa tayo miyembro ng ICC, meron na ho tayong general na pahintulot sa anumang mga international body katulad ng ICC na tugisin at litisin ang mga Pilipino na magiging kasabwat sa mga tinatawag na crimes against humanity katulad ng malawakang EJK sa ilalim ng drug war. Hindi pa tayo miyembro ng ICC na ilahad na natin sa batas na yan na kung sakali may international body na nag-iimbestiga ng crimes against humanity, maaari nating isurrender o i-extradite sa international body na katulad ng ICC sa The Hague, Netherlands and mga sangkot sa mga ganitong klase ng krimen. I do recognize, and I think you will agree with me, that it will be totally discretionary on the part of the Philippine authorities. Just like yung mga sa extradition po natin, na pwede natin na isurrender muna, ipaubaya muna in the requesting party, yung isang akusado na covered sa extradition treaty, pero nasa atin pa rin yun kung gagawin natin yun. Kaya ko po to sinasabi, kasi through this law, we have recognized the jurisdiction of the ICC over crimes against humanity committed in the Philippines, even before we ratified the Rome Statute as a binding treaty. Sarili na po nating batas ang nagsasabi na kailangan natin makipag-ugnayan sa ICC kahit noong hindi pa tayo miyembro ng ICC, lalo na noong tayo ay miyembro na. At kahit hindi na tayo miyembro ng ICC dahil sa makasariling pagkalas ni Duterte sa ICC noong 2018. Para sabihin natin na wala na tayong pakialam sa ICC, kailangan muna nating ipawalang bisa ang batas na ito. However, I respectfully submit, rather than repeal this law, we should now take steps to retract the self-serving act of Mr. Duterte to withdraw from the ICC in 2018. We must return to the fold of the ICC. We must rejoin the community of nations who have recognized the need for an international body of nations who have recognized to go after the perpetrators of the most terrible crimes against humanity, the hostis humani generis, the enemies of humankind. Mga kaaway lamang ng sangkatauhan ang takot sa pagsasanib puwersa ng mga bansa upang matigil ng pagpatay ng walang habas sa ngalan ng Estado. But having said that, I still appreciate so much, many people appreciate so much the efforts of this Quad Committee that can very well be indeed the Truth Commission. Kaya lang tindang natin, yung napaka-komplikado talaga ng usapin ng war of drugs. Kadaming biktima na hindi naman natin pwedeng busisiin lahat for every individual acts of killing. Kundi, dapat anuhin natin, maganda nga yung nangyayari doon sa mga revelasyon ni Colonel Garma, na ganyan yung ginamit nilang model. At tinuturo mismo si Mr. Duterte. So ano lang siya? Supplemental, ano lang siya? It's just corroborating everything else that we know from news reports, from other information, and from yung mga nangyayari beginning in 2016. So I just shared my views on the need to rejoin ICC kasi you can never tell in the future ano man yung resulta ng itong ginagawang investigasyon ng Quad Committee na in the future we will have another tyrant, another mass killer for a president. So, ganun po ang aking opinion sa bagay na yan. Maraming salamat
Mr.
po.
Chair,
Thank you, Senator Laila de Lima, for your sharing with us, the Hindi Quadcom, your opinion on the very important national issue of extrajudicial killings. So,
clarificatory lang.
Congressman Abante, you're now recognized.
Former Senator, kailan niyo po itong napag-aralan? Nung kayo po ay CHR pa? CHR pa ho kayo?
Opo. I became a CHR chairperson in 2008. Noong 2009 po, sinimulan namin yung investigation into the Davao Death Squad. Dahil nga may mga impormasyon po kami noon, and nakita lalo namin yung report ni UN Special Rapporteur Philip Alston and some other reports like the one issued by the Human Rights Watch, You Can Die Anytime. The title of that is You Can Die Anytime, referring to the killings under this group, which are now euphemistically called the Davao Death Squad. Kaya lang po, if I may say so, na yung aking pong termino or yung aking pag-upo bilang CHR chairperson hanggang 2010 lang po. Dahil in 2010, na-appoint na po ako as Justice Secretary ng dating Pangulong Noynoy Aquino.
So pinagpatuloy niyo po ba yung investigasyon ng kayo Secretary of Justice Department?
Konti lang po yung mga nagawa ng DOJ nung secretary na po ako. Although si Matubato, sumipot po siya, at we gave him, the DOJ gave him witness protection. Kaya lang, nung uupo na po in 2016, yung dating Pangulong Duterte, bilang Pangulo, ay umalis na po siya sa witness protection program. Yun po ang pagkakaalam ko. Pero meron po akong extensive personal investigation notes on what we gathered. Kasi yung mga nakausap namin in the course of that CHR inquiry na magaganda o mahalaga yung mga sinasabi nila, kasama na rin yung tungkol sa reward system, ay sila po yung mga kinausap lang namin ng mga sikreto lang. Kasi ayaw nilang humarap doon mismo sa open public inquiry ng CHR
Pero marami
noong
ho kayo
2009.
nakausap.
About, if I'm not mistaken, it's about 5 of them. At in-interview lang namin sila. Kasi sa karamihan sa kanila ay hindi naman ayaw pong mag-execute ng formal affidavit, but we interviewed them. That's why I took down notes, personal notes, and gumamit nga po sila ng mga aliases.
Pwede niyo po bang isubmit ang inyong findings sa committee?
Yes, I can share with this committee my personal investigation notes on the conduct of the CHR inquiry. Kasi pag alis ko nga po, wala pa yung resolution. Later on, the CHR under new leadership came out with a resolution. I think that was in June of 2012.
Okay, Mr. Chair, did you also submit that to the ICC? Your findings?
My personal notes, I think I have. My personal notes, at meron pa ho ako mga iba na mga shinare with the ICC.
One last question, Mr. Chair. I would like to refer to Colonel Espinido. You were directly mentioned by the former senator. So will you please answer her now on that issue? Are you corroborating with the former senator on this, or?
Good morning, Your Honors, Mr. Chair. Good morning, ma'am. For me, as Chief of Police at that time in Albuera, I am one of endorsing the complaint to the DOJ. One of those names is Ma'am Laila de Lima. For the affidavit that was already made by Mayor Espinosa together with his lawyer, Villarino. So as Chief of Police, I am one who endorsed that complaint to the Ombudsman. But for me, talk with Ma'am de Lima in the Senate that I'm telling her that, Ma'am, the truth will set you free. Because for me, I am innocent for that. As just only a chief of police who endorsed the complaint to the DOJ. But yung knowledge talaga, sir, hindi ko alam kung totoo na siya involved si ma'am. No? As being chief of police lang, na yun talaga ang procedure na mag-endorse kung may mga complaint. Pero I believe at the time, Your Honors, Mr. Chair, na kinausap na si Mayor Espinosa kung nalaman naman ng buong mundo na si Mayor Espinosa was already there in Camp Crame to Sirbato for surrender. So pag turn over niya sa akin, dala na yung mga statement na ganon. So what I did is just only to endorse the complaint to the Ombudsman, Your Honors, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, thank you. I'll be asking more questions later on.
Thank you, Congressman Abante. We have a list of those who will interpellate Senator Laila de Lima. And the first to interpellate is Congressman Raul Manuel. You are recognized. You have 10 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Nabanggit po ni Senator Laila de Lima na ang leader mismo ng Davao Death Squad ay mismo yung dating mayor din, Mayor Rodrigo Duterte. Did I hear it right, Mr. Chair?
Yes, those are the claims of those witnesses that we talked to. That is also the claim of Edgar Matobato and Arturo Las Cañas.
At Mr. Chair, siya po yung merong alias na Superman bilang leader ng Davao Death Squad.
That is correct.
Mr. Chair,
Given na meron ngang mga rewards doon sa mga napapatay na mga suspects or involved di umano sa drug trade, Mr. Chair, ano ang source nitong binayad doon sa mga kasama yung mga informants, yung mga civilian na mga force multipliers, pati sa mga assassins?
Nabanggit ko po yan sa statement ko kanina o sa presentation ko kanina na meron nang gagaling from the office of the mayor itself. The intel funds from the office of the mayor. The DDS logistics and finances came from the Peace and Order or Intel Fund of MRRD. That's according to the CHR witnesses and also from Las Cañas ICC affidavit.
Mr. Chair, may we get once again yung breakdown, ano po yung mga pwedeng pinagpuntahan nitong intelligence funds? Halimbawa, as mentioned, meron pong pati mga Christmas gifts dun sa mga police na aktibong nagpatupad ng ganitong tipo ng gera kontra droga.
Yes. Yung nasa isang slide kanina, yung according to the CHR witness kung ilan yung amount, kung magkano yung amount for the 1988 to 2000 period. Kasi sinabi ko kanina na actually 2 periods yung DDS. 1998 to 2000, then 2001 to 2016. Nagkaroon ng break nung naging congressman yung dating mayor. Now, so 15,000, 5,000 to the handler, 10,000 to the assassins, and then yung sa 13,000 to 15,000, 3,000 to 5,000 for the handler, 7,000 to 8,000 for the assassins, and 500 to 1,000 for civilian informant abanteros. They call them abanteros. Yung kay Mr. Las Cañas naman, ang sinabi niya sa kanyang affidavit, DDS members were paid anywhere from 10,000 to 20,000 for every victim. Yun yung sa mga ordinary victims. At yun naman, meron naman tinatawag na special project killings, mas mataas. They were rewarded anywhere from 100,000 to 1 million pesos depending on the status of the target. Yun po ang mga natandaan ko nung binasa ko yung affidavit ni Mr. Las Cañas at doon din po nung binasa ko at review ko yung aking personal investigation notes from the CHR investigation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, merong nabanggit din na merong weekly gas allowance. Bahagi po ba iyon ng bayad sa mga pulis na nagpatupad ng Davao level war on drugs? Merong weekly gas allowance, may
Yes.
bukod pang cash allowance, tsaka
Yes.
Christmas gifts.
According to Mr. Las Cañas, this includes weekly gas allowance, monthly cash allowance, and Christmas cash gifts.
Mr. Chair, ano po ang pagtingin ng ating resource person, Senator Laila de Lima? Kasi
kung ang nabanggit ni Colonel Garma ay pinatupad ang Davao model from ang scope lang ay sa Davao City at ginawa itong isang nationwide na drug campaign at ang source ng funding para dun sa rewards, Mr. Chair, ay ang intelligence fund sa Davao City. Posible po ba na ang ginamit din dun naman sa nationwide na war on drugs ay ang intelligence funds pero this time ay yung intelligence funds ng Office of the President?
Mr. Chair, Your Honors, the possibility is always there, but I have no knowledge about that. I don't know that. Wala pa po akong nakita na mga dokumento na nasa akin na yun talaga ang source nung drug war na from 2016 up to 2022. But it's quite possible kasi meron talagang reward system. We can only surmise at this point in the absence of direct evidence na meron talagang magsasabi kung saan talaga yun ang galing. Maybe sila Colonel Garma, sina Colonel Leonardo, baka alam nila because they were part of that. Si Colonel Garma, yung inutusan according to her na maghanap ng pwedeng mag-implement ng drug war based on the Davao model. And this is, yung sinabi ko kanina, this was the Davao model. May kasamang mga reward, may kasamang mga cash incentives, may bracketing din, depende kung sino involved, kung sino papatay. And so that's the reward, that's the incentives. So, posible rin na gumamit uli ng Intel Fund, this time from the Office of the President.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before I proceed sa iba kong tanong, dahil Mr. Chair, kung doon pa lang sa unang taon ng pagpapatupad ng war on drugs sa ilalim ni former President Rodrigo Duterte, dun sa Committee on Human Rights, nakuha nating figure at mismo ay yun pa yung sinight na accomplishment sa report ng Presidential Communications Office ay umabot sa nasa ilang tens of thousands. Kung ang ititake nating figure, Mr. Chair, ay 20,000 kasama din yung mismo ay confirmed na police yung pumatay, tapos maging yung mga vigilante killings, Mr. Chair, na ang pumatay ay pwedeng hindi kilalang mga tao pero bahagi yun ng tinuturing na tagumpay, di umano, ng war on drugs. Kinumpute kasi natin, Mr. Chair, kung 20,000, doon pa lang sa time frame na yon, 20,000 na yung mga tapos, kung yung minimum na reward ay 50,000, assuming pa lang na mga small time or yung mga peddlers, yung mga pinatay, Mr. Chair, at least aabot ko, imamultiply natin, Mr. Chair, 20,000 times 50,000, kakailanganin ang nasa 1 billion pesos pa lang dun sa mga reward sa pagpatay, Mr. Chair. Hindi pa kasama dito yung mga allowances, yung mga, kung merong mga weekly gas allowance pa rin, weekly cash allowance at iba pa. Sa rewards pa lang, Mr. Chair, sa ganong time frame, 1 billion pesos na ang kailangan. Pero Mr. Chair, kung ikukumpara kasi natin sa intelligence funds pa lang ng PNP, and let's take yung first year ng Duterte administration, ang intelligence funds ng PNP noong 2017 ay nasa 468 million pesos lamang, Mr. Chair. Walang kalahating bilyong piso ang intelligence funds ng PNP. So kung ganun, Mr. Chair, saan pwede talagang kumuha nung ganun kalaking pera bilang pangbayad, bilang premyo doon sa mga pulis na nakapatay? Kaya Mr. Chair, kung magpa-process of elimination tayo, dahil PNP lang naman yung pwedeng ahensya, sana na pagkunan ng ganun. Pero then again, kahit yung intelligence funds ng PNP hindi sapat. So wala nang ibang agency, Mr. Chair, na merong mas malaki pang intelligence funds na pwedeng pagkunan. Walang iba, kundi yung mismong Office of the President. Lalo na kung itutugma din natin yan dun sa mga testimonya na merong mga taga-presidential management staff na bahagi rin nung channel nung reward system na ito mula sa presidente patungo sa mga kasunod na mga level ng mga police officers, maging si Senator Bongo, si PNP Chief Bato de la Rosa at iba pang mga dating opisyal
under the Duterte administration. Kaya with that, Mr. Chair, tingin natin meron ding sapat na batayan para atin na ring silipin paano ginamit ng Duterte administration ang kanyang intelligence funds. Darating din sa punto, Mr. Chair, na dapat ay mag-issue na rin tayo ng subpoena ducis tecum sa mga dokumento na sinubmit ng Office of the President to COA, to the Commission on Audit, para talaga mabusisi natin kung ano yung naging justifications for the use of intelligence funds by the Office of the President under Rodrigo Duterte. So, kasunod, Mr. Chair, kasunod na tanong kay Senator Laila de Lima. Nabanggit po kasi ang tungkol sa quarry mass grave. At kung isipin ko pa lang, kahindik-hindik ito, Mr. Chair. Kaya pasintabi na lang po sa ating mga kababayan na baka sa ganitong oras ay kumakain habang nanonood sa Quadcom hearing. Mr. Chair, meron po bang binigay na description yung kung sino mang witness patukol sa paano ba na-facilitate ang ganitong mga mass grave? Paano gumagana yung, paano hinandle ang ganitong mga mass grave?
Mr. Chair, Your Honors, kasama po kasi sa organizational structure ng DDS ay yung pinakita po kanina na there is this SPO4 Bienvenido Laod as team handler and in charge of the Laod Quarry Mass Grave. Nandyan din po yung si SPO3 Jim Tan as team handler and in charge of the Mandog Mass Grave. Doon pa lang ho, nung nag-iimbesti kami sa 2009, may mga nakapagsabi na po sa amin na meron ganyan na mga mass graves kung saan tinatapon yung mga naging biktima ng DDS. Now, sinubukan ho namin na puntahan yung sa Laod Quarry. Kaya lang, nung pagdating po namin doon, mukhang hindi ho namin naabot yung exact location kasi the Laod property is a hilly part. Medyo ano po yun, parang hill. And then, akala namin hanggang dun lang at a certain point, nakakita kami ng ilan-ilan, konti lang, na human remains, skull. Pero, we learned later na hindi naman pala doon yung mga talagang mass grave of that property. It was in a higher portion of the Laod property. Na nandun nga daw po yung karamihan ng mga tinatapon nila na mga Pinay. So there are actually several mass graves from various sources. Yung Laod, and then yung Mandog mass grave, and then meron din ho sa Samal Island. Yun po ang mga impormasyon na nakuha namin. So we actually applied for search warrant. But then, nag-quinash ho ng isang RTC of Manila or Quezon City, I'm not sure anymore. Later, na reverse yung quashal of the search warrant ng Court of Appeals. And then eventually, the Supreme Court in 2014 affirmed the validity of the search warrant or affirmed the decision of the Court of Appeals. Kaya lang, wala na hong naging follow-up implementation of the warrant of arrest, either by CHR or by PNP, because I think because by 2014, insofar CHR is concerned, its investigation closed already when it submitted or issued its resolution of June 2012. So hindi na po na-follow up yung sana ng mga mass graves na yan.
Mr. Chair, may nabanggit na tatlong location ng mga mass grave. Doon sa course ng investigation ni Senator Laila bilang dating chairperson ng Commission on Human Rights, meron po bang credible estimate kung ilan itong mga mass grave na ito na siyang facilitate ng Davao Death Squad bilang bahagi ng war on drugs?
It was difficult to really determine to come up with a credible figure. Ang natatandaan ko po, yung si Edgar Matobato, meron din po siyang sinabi tungkol dyan. I'm not sure if he actually mentioned any number with respect dun sa mga alam niya, na mga linibing nila. In fact, in some of those, participant talaga siya sa paglilibing, kasama yung mga iba pang miyembro ng DDS. So I have to check from Mr. Matobato's affidavit, and also his testimony before the Senate, kung meron siya talagang nabanggit na estimate of the number. But again, I think it would be difficult really na makuha natin kung ilan talaga yung mga living doon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Pero Mr. Chair, at least, so far alam natin merong at least 3 na mga mass grave. Tama po ba?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kasi Mr. Chair, isipin pa lang natin kahit nga isang mass grave pa lang ay sobrang heinous na ng kung sino man yung mga gagawa ng isang ganong bagay. Tapos doon lang basta-basta magtatambak ng mga ng mga tao na merong mga pamilya, 'di ba? Merong mga pinanggagalingan din, merong mga gusto sanang gawin sa buhay pero napatay na lang ng ganun na lamang. Mr. Chair, meron pa ba kahit isa lang doon sa mga bangkay mula sa mga mass grave na na-retrieve pa para maibalik sa kanilang mga pamilya?
Wala po ako matandaan.
Mr. Chair, meron din bang mga pamilya na lumapit sa CHR dahil ang suspecha po nila ay dahil hindi na nila mahanap yung kanilang mga pamilya, sila po ay nag-isip na baka nasa mass grave na yung bangkay ng kanilang mga kamag-anak. May ganun po bang mga instances?
Wala po akong ma-recall if there are really families ng mga victims sa DDS na lumapit sa CHR para hanapin yung kanilang mga bangkay. Ang alam ko, because it's more recent, is that may mga families of victims who visited me when I was in jail at Camp Crame at the PNP Custodial Center, and there were quite a number of them who relayed to me yung mga naging experience nila, yung tungkol sa pagpatay under the war on drugs. But as to the mass graves, again, I will have to review my personal notes. Comprehensive po yung aking personal notes, and I'll have to check that out. Mr. Chair, Your Honors.
Mr. Chair, noong ginawa ng nationwide model, yung model ng war on drugs galing sa Davao na pinamunuan nung then Mayor Rodrigo Duterte. So, Chair, dahil I would assume na hindi na ganun kadaling mag-set up ng mga mass graves, lalo na kung ginawa halimbawa yung Oplan Tokhang sa mga urban centers. So, in that case, ay based dun sa initial investigations nung si Senator Laila de Lima ay nag-lead na po ng isang komite sa Senado. Ano na po yung kadalasang paraan para ma-dispose yung bangkay ng mga naging biktima, no? Kahit ng mga innocenteng biktima ng war on drugs?
Siyempre yung mga sa salvaging. Pero alam niyo po about the Senate inquiry. I was the chairperson of the Senate Committee on Justice and Human Rights, but I was able to preside or conduct only an inquiry for 3 hearings. Kasi po, after the 3rd hearing, kung saan prinisenta ko po si Edgar Matobato, ay inalis na po ako bilang chairperson of that committee by the majority of my colleagues then. So iba na po yung nagpatuloy. Because in that Senate inquiry, gusto ko sana talagang tukuyin na yung mga killings na yan, starting in 2016, are really state-sponsored or state-inspired. Kaya lang, as I would remember, may naka-ready actually na about 13 CHR witnesses from the CHR na pinovide sa Senate Committee on Justice and Human Rights. Pero 2 pa lang po yung na-present ko, and also si Mr. Edgar Matobato, but I was already ousted as a CHR chairperson. Now, after the 3rd hearing, what I recall is that 3 more hearings were done under a new chairperson. Pero it was abruptly terminated kasi they did not even call the other available CHR witnesses na ready sanang i-present before I was ousted as CHR chairperson. They did not even present them. So ang nangyari, they issued the findings, the resolution, and one of the core finding is that there's no evidence that the killings at that time were actually state-sponsored. Something that I wanted to prove sana kung hinayaan lang po ako. Although of course I could understand that perhaps it was such a tough job, a tough challenge for me to prove it, especially that nandyan pa yung dating Pangulo sa poder, na nahihirapan pa na talagang kumuha ng mga iba pa, ng mga witnesses, especially from within. Hindi katulad po ngayon na naglalabasan na po sila. May mga insiders na po na sinasabi na kung ano yung mga nalalaman nila, but not during the time. Pero I wanted to do it. After sana the presentation of those CHR witnesses, these are individual accounts of individual cases of summary execution during operations, yung mga sinasabi nilang ng laban, pero hindi naman pala nanlaban. I was also looking at the medical certificates, the various medical certificates that we got. Marami po yun. At ang dami talagang mga kaduda-duda doon. And of course, we summoned then PNP Chief Bato de la Rosa and other officials of the PNP, but they were all denying that these are the workings of PNP forces or that these are cases of case, and let alone state-sponsored killings. So yun po. So nothing came out. It was almost a whitewash.
Kindly wrap up, please.
Yes, huling topic, Mr. Chair, since na-present din ang relation ng ating local law dun sa ICC or yung International Criminal Court. Since some camps would say na hindi dapat tayo maging open sa quote-unquote intervention, no? Ganun yung tinatawag sa mga hakbang na ginagawa ng International Criminal Court since dapat daw ay ipatupad natin yung ating sariling batas. Wag daw tayong pumayag na panghimasukan tayo, no? Ganun yung pagtingin sa ginagawa ng ICC. But since Senator Laila mentioned yung Section 17 ng RA 9851, tama po ba yung aking interpretation, Mr. Chair, na pinapatupad pa rin naman natin yung ating local law, which is yung RA 9851, if the Philippine government cooperates with the International Criminal Court? Dahil sa committee nga po natin, Mr. Chair, sa Committee on Human Rights and Committee on Justice, we approved a resolution. We are urging, as part of the legislative, we are urging the executive na mag-cooperate sa ICC when it comes to this war on drugs. So, ibig sabihin, Mr. Chair, we are not surrendering our sovereignty. We are actually implementing the intent of our domestic laws kapag mag-cooperate ang Philippine government sa ICC. Tama po ba yung aking pagtingin, Mr. Chair?
Tama po yan, Mr. Chair and Your Honors. Dahil nga nandyan ang batas. In fact, nauna pa yan, 2009, before the Senate ratified the Rome Statute. But yung Rome Statute po was signed as early as 2000. I was just reminded by Attorney Conte earlier that it was actually signed by the former President Erap Estrada. Kaya lang, the ratification took some time. So it was only in 2011. But before that, pinasa nga itong RA 9851. And sa pagbabasa ko nga po ng mga provisions ng 9851, it is as if those who pushed for that are actually anticipating that there would be an international body that would be coming in or would be involved in the investigation of crimes that would fall under any of those crimes cognizable by ICC, including crimes against humanity. Kaya nila siguro pinasok yung Section 17 na yan. Malinaw sa akin na kahit may investigasyon tayo dito, pwede pa tayong makipag-cooperate. And there's nothing in the Rome Statute which says except the complementarity principle, na ang hinihintay kasi ng ICC ay yung genuine investigation focusing on those with the highest or the greatest responsibility. If I may just quote from the ICC pre-trial chamber's decision in January 26, 2023, decision authorizing the resumption of the investigation. Ang naging conclusion nila, kaya they ordered for the resumption of the proceedings of the ICC investigation at dinismiss nila yung appeal ng Philippine government. And I quote, "The domestic proceedings in the Philippines do not sufficiently mirror the expected scope of the court's investigation since they only address the physical low-ranking perpetrators and at present do not extend to any high-ranking officials." Further, the ICC pre-trial chamber said, "The chamber finds that the PH has failed to demonstrate that the Philippines has failed to demonstrate that it has conducted relevant investigations and prosecution with respect to 4 issues." This was in 2023, as I said, ito yung decision nila authorizing the resumption. Number 1, the alleged killings in Davao from 2011 to 2016, which is within the duration of the ICC investigation. Pwede lang kasi mag-imbestiga yung ICC from yung sa 2011 up to 2019 when the withdrawal became effective. Number 2, crimes other than murder committed in connection with the war on drugs. 3, the killings outside official police operations, Meaning yung mga riding in tandem, yung mga hindi natin sigurado kung mga police ba yan or are these agents of police officers, yung mga assassins. And number 4, and this is very important, the responsibility of individuals beyond the physical perpetrators of the alleged crimes. So ang hinihintay nila, yung mga tunay na investigasyon targeting or involving yung mga nasa taas, beginning with the former president, who is clearly the mastermind as he induced the killings. And that is becoming clearer and clearer as nakikita natin dito sa mga lumalabas sa Quadcom hearing. Then that is the complementarity principle. Since hindi pa nila nakikita may tunay na investigasyon, and when they say investigation or proceedings, they are clearly referring to criminal proceedings. So ito pong magiging resulta ng Quadcom. Fine, I think we can be hopeful and optimistic na may mga lalabas. Pero later po, o may lalabas na resolusyon na can also categorically identify yung mga nasa taas based on the evidence na makakalap o kinakalap na ngayon ng Quad Committee. But later, kung hanggang doon lang po at hanggang doon lang yung mga gagawin din ng Kongreso, because ang mandato ng Kongreso is, in aid of legislation to enact laws, it could only recommend to the other relevant agencies and offices kung ano pa mga dapat gawin, including the investigation. Kung wala talaga yung investigation na yan, hindi po natin pwedeng pigilan ang ICC. Because yun na yung sinabi nila. Kasi hindi pa naman talaga tina-target, puro lang sa low level. Tsaka yung ICC is not actually focusing on the low level. It's not possible for them to look into each and every case of killings under war on drug. Kaya dun sila nakatuon sa mga those with the greatest responsibility. So,
Okay, so to wrap up, Mr. Chair.
This is your last question, Congressman
Yes.
Manuel. Thank you.
Yes, so just a closing manifestation, Mr. Chair, na batay dun sa mga narinig natin, edi habang yung mga nasa tuktok kasi dati na ngayon ay dapat sanang sumagot sa mga tanong natin, ay naghahanap ng iba't ibang paraan para makaiwas o parang nakipag-patintero tayo sa kanila, Mr. Chair. Kaya sa totoo lang, dapat ay ma-exhaust natin yung iba't ibang mga paraan para talaga may sulong yung hustisya para dun sa mga naging biktima ng extrajudicial killings. At bahagi niyan, Mr. Chair, habang meron tayong mga ganitong investigasyon, actually, yung pagsulong din ng investigasyon ng ICC, it complements our efforts dito sa bansa natin. And also, Mr. Chair, yung fact din na dahil nga mula sa Davao ay in-apply on a nationwide scale kung ano yung kanilang approach dun sa Davao at intelligence funds yung ginamit nila doon, we also observe a pattern, Mr. Chair, na from just 250 million pesos na level ng intelligence funds for the Office of the President, lumobo pa ito to 1.25 billion pesos. Kaya, Mr. Chair, malaki yung posibilidad talaga na ito din ay isa sa pinagmulan ng pera para mapagana yung peke at madulang war on drugs. Kaya dapat din ay mabusisi natin paano yan ginamit ng Duterte administration. Yun lang, Mr. Chair. Maraming
Mr.
salamat.
Chair.
Thank you, Congressman Manuel.
Mr. Chair, can I just add very, very short?
Okay, please,
Meron po
Senator,
kasing sinabi
make it
si,
short. Yeah.
Honorable Manuel. Isa pa ho sa sinabi ng ICC Pre-Trial Chamber in concluding na it does not sufficiently mirror their investigation, itong mga proceedings, whatever proceedings are being conducted as of 2023. Ang sabi po, any ongoing domestic investigation, at least that's as of 2023, has failed to inquire into any pattern of criminality or the systematic nature of crimes. So gusto po yan i-establish ng ICC dahil hindi pa nila nakita yan sa mga investigasyon dito. The pattern of criminality or the systematic nature of crimes o yung state policy angle. Yun po ang dapat tingnan din.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Senator De Lima. Now, the next interpellator is Congressman Rog Gutierrez. You have 10 minutes, and please shorten our interpellations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I'll just be directing my questions to the former Senator De Lima, and I'll try to make it quick, Mr. Chair. To the Chair, most respectfully, just to give us a background po, no? Kasi I'm sure we'll have more opportunities in later time, but just to lay the base for the interpellation that we're having, for the inquiry that we're having, could you please give us a background through the Honorable Chairman of your service? Because as I understand, you were previously chairwoman for the CHR, is that correct? And after that, you were the secretary for the DOJ from 2010 to 2015?
Yes, Mr. Chair, Your Honors.
And then senator from 2016 to 2022?
Yes, sir.
Prior to your stint as in the CHR, may we know of your track service po in relation, anything that would be relevant to the investigation on the ETK?
My first government service was as CHR chairperson. Before that, I was a practitioner, an election law practitioner. Actually, I didn't have any background in human rights before I was appointed by the former President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo as CHR chairperson. So I was an election law practitioner. So that was my area of expertise. Very limited lang po yung exposure ko ng human rights before I joined the Commission on Human Rights.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Given that background, I guess for the purposes of our inquiry on ETK, it would be appropriate to limit the interpellation for the years 2018 up to the up to now, since she still is espousing this as her advocacy. So, Mr. Chair, maybe just clarify during your stint at the CHR in 2008 to 2010, this was when you started the investigation into the Davao Death Squad.
Yes, Your Honor, 2009.
2009. And what is the result of this? How do you call this? Is this an inquiry? Is this?
Yes, it was actually a public inquiry. We held several public hearings right there in Davao City. In fact, one of the resource persons that we summoned, and the very first resource person that we summoned was then Mayor Rodrigo Duterte. We also summoned some other officers, especially in the police force and barangay captains, etc. Now, I was saying earlier that yung mga nakausap kasi namin ng mga insiders, kasi at that time, hindi pa namin nakausap sila Matobato and si Las Cañas. Their names were already mentioned, but we never met them before. Nung sa Senate inquiry na lang sila lumabas. So, yung sabi ko po kanina, nahirapan nga kami nung una because we have to really hold very discreet and mga nagtatago kami nun whenever we were interviewing these witnesses. And we have to use aliases. Of course, they gave us the names, the true names, but they said they should not be revealed. Their true names. So, natapos namin yung hearings, but hindi ko na po natapos yung pinaka-report because I was already appointed as DOJ Secretary. Although, as I said, I do have with me the personal investigation notes, which I actually shared with the CHR, yung pagkakatanda ko po noon. And the CHR later came up with this resolution in June 2012. Meron din po sila mga findings doon. But yung iba po, marami po doon sa mga personal investigation notes na hindi na po nila nasama doon sa CHR resolution. I have no personal knowledge about the deliberations of the CHR and bank nung wala na po ako. Now, which resulted in their resolution issued in June of 2012. Ang alam ko po, ang natatandaan ko po sa resolution na yon of 2012 is one of their recommendations is to investigate and file administrative and criminal charges against then Mayor Rodrigo Duterte and police officers who were identified to be members of the Davao Death Squad.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, so from 2008 to 2010, your stint as chairperson
2008.
2008 to 2010, you started the investigations. You've had a few public hearings. You were not around for the resolution. But the resolution in June 2012, there was one of the recommendations was to start an investigation. This was at the time that you were already Secretary of Justice, is correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Did you start any investigation in relation to the filing of this resolution?
The resolution was directed also to the Ombudsman and also to investigative agencies to conduct further investigation. I gave instructions to our NBI to follow through with the findings. Although my information then was that nahihirapan din sila. They could not even trace those witnesses anymore. So, si Matobato nga po, even if he was covered under the Witness Protection Program, eventually he left dahil hindi pa naman natapos yung investigation. Na yung supposedly follow-through investigation din ng NBI.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, and just for the record, since 2012 and the stint was over by 2015, in the span of 3 years, I understand it would be hard to really ready a case and it would have spilled over. However, Mr. Chair, just a quick question. Yung personal notes po that you mentioned and that you submitted to the ICC, is this an official document?
It's a personal investigation notes because it contained the facts, the information that we got from several witnesses. As I recall, shinare ko ho yun dun sa CHR team as part of the records of the investigation of the DDS. But this cannot be considered official because this was not really formally adopted, as far as I know, by the CHR and bank nung umalis na po ako.
So it was not, Mr. Chair, it was not adopted by the CHR since it's personal in nature. However, it has been accepted by the ICC. Is that correct?
Yes, I shared it. As I recall, although I cannot really say categorically kung talagang naipa-share ko yun because I was one of those who submitted actually a communication with the ICC, the supplemental communication. I must have mentioned that there.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Chair, for the last question, for the last topic on the background, the professional government background, this is your Senate stint from 2016 to 2022, in which you held 3 public hearings on the EJK. May we know what was the status at the end of that? I understand under our rules we can take notice of proceedings in the Senate, but for the benefit of everyone here, and especially those who might not have have not been part of the government at the time, may we know what was the result of that inquiry, or was it just abruptly stopped?
The Senate Committee on Justice and Human Rights, chaired by another senator because I was no longer the chair, issued a resolution, I think if I'm not mistaken, December of 2016. I also submitted a dissenting report, a 144-page dissenting report. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the Senate resolution made a conclusion that there's no evidence that the killings then were state-sponsored. And may mga recommendations there, but not about filing of cases against Mr. Duterte because nga yung hindi naman tinapos, there was an abrupt termination of those proceedings. As I mentioned, hindi nga present lahat yung mga available CHR witnesses, so it was never pursued. And it's no longer surprising na ganun yung naging conclusion nila na hindi daw po state-sponsored, although they made several good recommendations about, reforms in the PNP system, etc., etc.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, moving forward, of course, chronologically, this is no longer part of your government service, but we can't escape the fact that cases were filed against you po. May we just know what is the status of these cases right now? Because, of course, this would come into the... some people might ask, some people might question the credibility of your presence here as a resource person. So we'd just like to know po, how many cases were filed and what is the status of each of these?
There were 3 drug-related cases filed against me. Initially, as consummated illegal drug trading. Illegal drug trading, consummated. But later, it was amended by the prosecution into conspiracy to commit illegal drug trading. I think they realized that they could not really make out a good case for consummated illegal drug trading kasi wala nga sila yung mga real evidence, wala yung corpus delicti, walang evidence of what exactly the kind of drugs that I allegedly traded, money trail, paper trail, wala lahat yun. So they amended those cases into conspiracy to commit illegal drug trading in the hope that sufficient na yung mga magiging testimonial evidence nung mga witnesses, mostly believed drug lords or believed inmates. And all 3 cases now have been dismissed, have been acquitted. These are definitely trumped-up charges.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the 3 cases were already dismissed. Have any of them been dismissed by virtue of a demurrer to evidence, or it was all sought?
Yes, the 2 of them. Among the 3, the first one was the grant of the demurrer to evidence. The second one was acquittal, and the third one was grant of demurrer to evidence. Now, the acquittal, the second case, ang alam ko po, ay inappeal pa ng Office of the Solicitor General to the Court of Appeals, which is clearly violative of the principle against double jeopardy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just note po, no, given the credibility for witness, and it's very important to note that the first and third were dismissed by virtue of filed demurrer to evidence, which means that the prosecution did not have evidence to the point that the defense no longer needed to present their own. So, Mr. Chair, moving forward, just a quick question now. Now that we're going to the meat, and I think we understand the former senator attended one of our hearings prior under the Committee on Ethics, Human Rights. However, at the time, wala pa po yung revelation ni Colonel Garma. So I think it really changes everything now that we have the revelations of Colonel Garma and the corroborative evidence that somehow the so-called Davao template was sought to be replicated in nationwide scale. We'd just like to ask, given we're lucky you have our resource person here comes today wearing multiple hats. She was the commissioner of the CHR, which the task actually is to be a counter check to our authorities. At the same time, she served as part of the structure of the authorities when she was Secretary of the Justice. And finally, while she was part of the Legislative under Senate, she actually filed an inquiry on EJK. So given your extensive knowledge of this and that you've had a background from the local up to the point and even chronologically up to the point in time in which supposedly there was already that progression from local to national. Could you please educate us? Because one thing that I think that we have to be concerned with is the so-called labeling of the war on drugs versus the EJK, extrajudicial killing. Because po, as we understand, based on the testimony of Colonel Garma, yung war on drugs po is under the auspices of authority. It is being conducted under the organization of the Philippine National Police, supposedly. Whether these elements of the PNP were working within or outside of the authority of the PNP, doesn't escape the fact that it's more aligned to the state-sponsored element. However, when we talk about the EJK, and specifically in your inquiry on the DDS, we're talking more of the vigilante killings. And I believe last time there was a presentation, I believe it was Attorney Conti. May we ask you very quickly to Attorney Conti, Mr. Chair, I understand in your presentation last time there was a distinct point in time in which the war on drugs transitioned from vigilante killings onto state-sponsored police operations. Can you please elucidate on that once again?
Yes, according to the data, the information from media reports, in the first 3 to 6 months of the war on drugs, it started with vigilante killings, and then eventually it transitioned to police perpetrated killings. So dito na po nagsimula bandang 2017 yung talagang police operations, whether by bust, arrest warrants or search warrants.
Thank you, Attorney Conti. Mr. Chair, so back to the former Senator De Lima. In your investigation of the so-called DTS, were you also investigating the police sponsor, the state-side aspect of the war on drugs, or was this purely on the vigilante?
It also included the police side, the PNP, the official, because of the HCIS, the Heinous Crimes Investigation Section. That was part of the official organizational structure of the DCPO, then the Davao City Police Office. So yung mga naging member, especially the original members of that Heinous Crimes Investigation Section were actually the DDS members, as testified on or attested to by, especially by Arturo Las Cañas. So it's not just the killings by the riding in tandem, the unknown assassins, but precisely the structure which points to the fact that these are headed, especially the handlers, by policemen under the DCPO. Yan po ang pagkakatanda ko dun sa mga nakuha naming impormasyon. So already covered.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the former senator has now confirmed, aside from the vigilante killings, the riding in tandem, and the Sinaloa-style killings, according to Attorney Conti, there were also police operations involved. Can you confirm for us, through the chairman, of course, the operational aspect of the police? This would include yung mga nanlaban in legitimate police operations and buy-bust operations. Was this something that was investigated in the locality of Davao during your time as CHR?
Yeah, some aspect of it because nga of the organizational structure. Because indeed, policemen were handling the operations. Yung mga sinabi ko pong pangalan, SPO4 Samson Benaventura as the Logistics Finance and Death Clearance Officer, SPO3 Arturo Las Cañas as overall team leader for operations and planning, sila SPO4 Bienvenido Laud as team handler, SPO3 Jim Tan as team handler. They were then, as far as I know, as far as I could recall from the records, they were then active police officers, but assigned to this HCIS, or Heinous Crimes Investigation Section, in charge of those killings.
Mr. Chair, thank you for the clarification. However, I think most respectfully, we have to clarify po, their being members of the PNP should be distinguished from the operations being undertaken by the PNP. Because while we have confirmed, based on your testimony that they are confirmed to be active members of the uniformed personnel. But if the way that the EJK was conducted was solely limited to the vigilante side, we're talking about Sinaloa killings, abduction, riding in tandem, extrajudicial. This would be different from the state, the police operation side. Because what we've seen based on the operations, they come in two forms. You have, usually when we're talking about the HVT, the high value target, this would rely on vigilante killings that we would see and have seen based on testimony also of Colonel Garma. But we also have to consider that for the supposedly legitimate operations in which later on there is supposedly allegedly planting of evidence, Nalalaman, drug buster by bus which has gone wrong, I think this would be considered as under the auspices of a legitimate police operation. Now, my question to the former senator, to the honorable chairman, is that was this part of the so-called DDS operations in the locality? Because what I'm talking about here, what we're basing on, the testimony of Colonel Garma is talking about the nationwide scale, and we've seen it. The testimony of Attorney Conti, we're talking nationwide, we've seen both vigilante and police operations. My question now is, at least for the investigation of the DDS in Davao, did this involve, because I understand there's the HCIS and that they were active members of the police force, but did they employ buy-bust operations and Nalalaman to perpetrate this so-called war on drugs?
To answer your question, Your Honor, I have to point out that the Nalalaman concept actually originated in Davao and invented by the DDS. So it's not something new. There may be fewer cases then, kasi karamihan nga is the riding in tandem, mga vigilante killings as induced by then Mayor Rodrigo Duterte. But there were also specific cases na ganun because the Nalalaman concept actually originated from the DDS operations.
Thank you for that confirmation. So although it might have been a few, it's not novel. There was a Nalalaman and there was supposedly legitimate police operations conducted in the locality.
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Chair, one more question on that. Given that the transition from the local to the national, from the local, it was talking about barangay to LGU level, city. Of course, it would take a lot of expanding for it to go into the national level. And we've had through the PNP yung now we're talking about yung double barrel, Oplan double barrel. You have the Tokhang and then the high value targets. Was this something that you also saw being conducted in Davao at the time that you were conducting your investigation to the DDS? Or was this purely mostly skewed towards the vigilante side?
Okay, the Oplan Tokhang and then later the Oplan double barrel, they became more pronounced and as they became official operations because of that PNP circular. No, I don't remember any evidence or any document or any information that there is such an official operations plan that could be similar to the Oplan Tokhang or Oplan double barrel. But as I said earlier, meron din mga Nalalaman operations. So these are actually implemented by certain police officers in Davao. So I would not know how they call them, but I'm sure there are really such plans. Kasi nga, dun sa organizational structure, again, based on on Arturo Lascania's information, it's then Mayor Rodrigo Duterte who was the very head of the Davao Death Squad.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And the last point, given that there might be some differences, it might not have been formalized, but we see a pattern. But
Yes.
most distinctly is that you have confirmed just earlier that there was a rewards and payment scheme. And I think this is what's very important for us here in this inquiry today, given that this has basically been confirmed by Colonel Garma. Unfortunately, Mr. Chair, I still have more questions regarding the policy, operation, and organizational parallelisms between the investigation perhaps that they had on the DDS and the inquiry that we have now in the EJK. But given that we have more resource persons and more colleagues who would like to interpolate, I will now yield for that time. Thank you very much, former Senator. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman Gutierrez.